may remember that last Sunday we got into chapter 5, and we'll finish it and then start chapter 6. So remember last week we have this battle. The Ark of the Covenant is captured, the Philistines take it, and a number of things happen, and we'll take a look at that. And then in chapter 6, the Ark gets returned to Israel. Remember, we talked a little bit about the significance of the Ark and why it's so important. Thing number one being that it's the chest that holds the tablets of the law, so it's literally a sort of visible sign of the covenant. And then thing number two, it's got the mercy seat on the top of it, which seems to be the earthly analog of God's heavenly throne. So the ark's been captured, it's been taken to the temple of Dagon, and the Philistines are feeling really good about that because they believe not only have they defeated Israel, but they've also defeated Israel's God. And so here's part of chapter 5 that describes what happened. Actually, I'll just go ahead and read the whole thing. This is 1 Samuel 5:1. When the Philistines captured the Ark of God, they brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod, one of the 5 Philistine cities. Then the Philistines took the Ark of God and brought it into the house of Dagon and set it up beside Dagon. And when the people of Ashdod rose early the next day, behold, Dagon had fallen face downwards on the ground before the Ark of the Lord. So they took Dagon and put him back in his place. But when they rose early on the next morning, behold, Dagon had fallen face downward on the ground before the Ark of the Lord. And the head of Dagon and both his hands were lying cut off on the threshold. Only the trunk of Dagon was left to him. This is why the priest of Dagon and all who enter the house of Dagon do not tread on the threshold of Dagon and Ashdod to this day. The hand of the Lord was heavy against the people of Ashdod. So there's two things happen. One is what happens with the statue of Dagon, and then the next series of things is the second thing that happens. And he terrified and afflicted them with tumors, both Ashdod and its territory. Just sort of a humorous little note here. The ESV has translated this word tumors. A couple of Old Testament scholars have suggested that the proper word here is hemorrhoids. I'm not going to debate that, or I'm not going to try and work through that, but you get the idea, right? There's a physical affliction that's been set upon the Philistines. And when the men of Ashdod saw how things were, they said, "The ark of the God of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is hard against us and against Dagon our God." So they sent and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines and said, "What shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel?" They answered, "Let the ark of the God of Israel be brought around to Gath." So they brought the ark of the God of Israel there. But after they had brought it around, the hand of the Lord was against the city, causing a very great panic. And he afflicted men of the city, both young and old, so that tumors broke out on them. So they sent the ark of God to Ekron. And as soon as the ark of God came to Ekron, the people of Ekron cried out, "They have brought around the ark of the God of Israel to kill us and our people." And they sent, therefore, and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines and said, "Send away the ark of the God of Israel, and let it return to its own place, that it may not kill us and our people." For there was a deathly panic throughout the whole city, and the hand of the Lord was very heavy there. And the men did not die, but were struck with tumors, and the cry of the city went up to heaven. And then notice how chapter 6 begins. The ark of the Lord was in the country of the Philistines 7 months, and the Philistines called for the priests and the diviners and said, "What shall we do with the ark of the Lord? Tell us, with what shall we send it in its place?" They said, "If you send away the ark of the Lord of the God of Israel, do not send it empty, but by all means return him a guilt offering. Then you will be healed, and it will be known to you why his hand does not turn away from you." And they said, "What is this guilt offering that we should return to him?" And they said, 5 golden tumors and 5 golden mice, according to the number of the lords of the Philistines. For the same plague was on all of you and on your lords. So you must make images of your tumors and images of your mice that ravage the lamb, and give glory to the God of Israel. Perhaps he will lighten his hand from you, and that from your gods and from your land. Why should you harden your hearts as the Egyptians? And Pharaoh hardened their hearts. And after he had dealt with them severely, did he not send the people away, and they departed? So notice a couple of really important things are happening here. First of all, notice there's a sense in which, right, the storyline kind of mirrors what happens in Egypt, right? The Ark of God is in the Philistine cities. They pass it around from one city to the next when tumors and bad things happen. They send it to the next city and the next city and the next city. And then finally, yeah, so wherever the ark goes, the same things happen over and over and over. And so finally, what happens is that the kings of the Philistine cities get together and they consult the priests and the diviners, which is obviously, remember what Pharaoh does, right? He consults them as well. And he asks them, well, what should we do? How can we solve this problem? And they say two things, I think, that are really important that that the story actually wants us to take note of. First is send it back. Okay, that's certainly part of it. But also notice here that the sending back isn't just, getting it out of here. The sending back is an admission of defeat. The sending back is an admission that we're dealing with something here that is more powerful than anything that we've dealt with before. And it's more powerful than anything we have. It's more powerful than our gods. We need to get rid of it because we don't know how to deal with this thing. Yes, Jan?
Interesting parallel to Hamas, because they've been defeated, but they act like they're not defeated. They're sending back the hostages, and they know IDF, they've already pretty much defeated, but they're pretending like they're not defeated. So they send goodie bags for the hostages to make them look like good guys. So I think that's a pretty interesting parallel to me.
Anyway, the idea here is that the Philistines have encountered something which is unparalleled in their experience, and so now they have to figure out what to do. And so they do two things, and both these things are really important, and we want to kind of notice what they are. First, notice that the diviners are familiar with the story of the Exodus. And they actually hold up the Egyptians and Pharaoh as sort of like negative examples, right? So remember, this is toward the middle of chapter 6. Here's what, in 6:6, the diviners say, "Why should you harden your hearts as the Egyptians?" And Pharaoh hardened their hearts after he had dealt severely with them. That is, the diviners here say, okay, look, remember, the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, was the most powerful ruler in the world. And even he had to get to that moment where he had to give up. Not because, he was really wise and discerning or something like that, but because things were ruined by this point, right? In Exodus 10:7, Pharaoh's advisors say this: "Do you not yet understand that Egypt is ruined?" In effect, right, the advisors are trying to find a nice way to tell this very powerful but also blind and arrogant man that his actions are completely foolish, right? And so that's what the diviners are doing in this case with the Philistine lords. And the second thing is, and this may sound strange to us, but the second thing their second part of the strategy, right, is to make golden images of what they've been afflicted with, tumors and mice. So apparently they were, there was an infestation of mice that, ate grain and, whatnot. And then tumors. I'm not really sure what a golden image of a tumor would look like. If we ever have to design a stained glass window with this story in it, we'll have to consult some artist about what that might look like, but I'll leave that to your imagination. The idea seems to be something like this. As the diviners say, right, this is a guilt offering. So here's what's going on, right? What they're doing is they're making golden images of the things they've been afflicted with. They're sending them back with the ark. But these aren't just like golden images that, are going to be put in a closet somewhere or something like that. The idea here is that the golden images are two things simultaneously. On one hand, right, they are a guilt offering, right? They're an admission of fault. That is, in effect, right, what the Philistine lords here do is they, in effect, offer a sort of corporate confession of sin. We have sinned against you. So in that sense, it's an admission of guilt. And then the other thing is that by making images of the afflictions, right, the idea is that if they're offered as an offering, that in effect that's one way to remove the affliction, right? We're afflicted with tumors, we make a golden image of the tumors, we offer those as a confession of sin, and then tumors hopefully go away. That's the logic that's at work here. Now I want to just dwell on one sentence here for a minute. This is 1 Samuel 6:5. It's, I think, an important idea. So you must make images of your tumors and images of your mice that ravage the lamb and give glory to the God of Israel. Now, I just want to say a word about that phrase because, as I said, I think it's really important. One of the things that Paul says in the first chapter of Romans, this is Romans 1:16-31, Paul identifies the essence of sin as the human unwillingness to render God the glory that's due to him. In effect, right, Paul's saying that's like the foundation of all sin. Everything proceeds from that, right? Or if you want to think about it this way, right? All sin begins with the human refusal in some way or other to acknowledge that God really is God and that we're simply creatures. And that's exactly the same thing that's going on here in 1 Samuel 6. That is, the Philistines are being brought to that point where they're having to acknowledge too, right, that they have not rendered to God the glory that is due him. Not only by taking the ark, but also kind of like pretty much by doing everything else. Their whole, everything they do is sort of falls under that category. So that's the idea here, is that they're going to render to God the glory that is due him, and they've been brought to that point where that has to happen.
Could you say they're admitting guilt, not truly repenting, though? I mean, are they really repenting or just admitting their guilt?
Well, I mean, true repentance is always hard to judge, right? It's something that only God fully is able to be aware of. But it's probably due to be a little skeptical here, right? I just want to offer a reflection here about the Ark of the Covenant and what it does here, because we want to kind of look at it, I think, for the important reality that it is. Notice here that both on the Israelite side and now on the Philistine side, we're learning something important about the ark, and then by extension, we're also learning something important about God. At one level, right, God's presence can bring immeasurable blessing and goodness. On the other hand, if people try to manipulate him, if they fail to render the glory that's due him, then the opposite can occur. And both Israel and the Philistines have an experience now of that, right? Israelites, severe military defeat. Philistines, their god statues toppled over and all kinds of physical afflictions, right? So we have both those things happening. And I think that this is really an important point because it's telling us something about God. And it's something I think that's really important to take to heart and to remember. It's really important, I think, because I think in a lot of our minds, we sometimes get the idea that God's goodness means that he would never cause any real harm to anyone. That's not what goodness means here. The idea here is that God's presence is both a source of blessing and curse. And the really fundamental lesson, I think, to take away from these two little episodes, right, is that the thing that one has to be really, really careful about is the human attempt to sort of domesticate God and to kind of confine him. One of the things that this story is saying is that will never work. Whether you're Israel, whether you're a pagan power, whoever is trying to do this, the lesson is it doesn't work and it can't. No domestication. So there's kind of a really important warning. Now, the Ark of the Covenant is sent back to Israel finally, and so we'll pick up the story in about 6, 7. Now then, take and prepare a new cart and 2 milk cows on which there has never been a yoke. Yoke the cows to the cart, but take their calves home away from them. And take the ark of the Lord and place it on the cart, and put a box at its side, the figures of gold which you are returning to him as a guilt offering. Then send it off and let it go its way, and watch. If it goes up on the way to its own land, to Beth-Shemesh, then it is he who has done us this great harm. But if not, then we shall know that it is not, that his hand has struck us. It has happened to us by coincidence. So the first part of instruction is put the ark on the cart, tie 2 cows to it, send it off, and hopefully it goes away. The men did so, and took 2 milk cows and yoked them to the cart and shut up their calves at home. And they put the ark of the Lord on the cart and the box with the golden mice and the images of their tumors. And the cows went straight in the direction of Beth-Shemesh along one highway, lowing as they went. They returned neither to the right nor to the left, and the lords of the Philistines went after them as far as the border of Beth-Shemesh. Now the people of Beth-Shemesh were reaping their wheat harvest in the valley. And when they lifted up their eyes and saw the ark, they rejoiced to see it. So now the ark's coming back to Israelite territory. Some people are out in the field harvesting. They see the ark coming back, and they're really happy to see it return. The cart came into the field of Joshua of Beth-Shemesh and stopped there. A great stone was there, and they split up the wood of the cart and offered the cows as a burnt offering to the Lord. And the Levites took down the ark of the Lord and the box that was beside it, in which there were golden figures, and set them on the great stone. And the men at Beth-Shemesh offered burnt offerings and sacrifices on that day to the Lord. And then the 5 lords of the Philistines saw it. They returned that day to Ekron. These are the golden tumors that the Philistines returned as a guilt offering to the Lord, one for Ashdod, one for Gaza, one for Askelon, one for Gath, and one for Ekron. And the golden mice according to the number of all the cities of the Philistines belonging to the 5 lords, both fortified cities and unwalled villages. The great stone beside which they set up the ark of the Lord is a witness to this day in the field of Joshua of Beth-Shemesh. And he struck some of the men of Beth-Shemesh because they looked upon the ark of the Lord. There's that theme again. He struck 70 men of them. And the people mourned because the Lord had struck the people with a great blow. And the men of Bethshemesh said, "Who is able to stand before the Lord, this holy God? And to whom shall he go up away from us?" So they sent messengers to the inhabitants of Kiriath Jearim, saying, "The Philistines have returned the ark of the Lord. Come down and take it up to you." So the ark comes back to Israelite territory. Some men of the town of Bethshemesh look upon the ark, and they are struck. And of course, there's reason for that. Remember back in the book of Leviticus, remember that only the Levites and the priests were supposed to see the ark and also touch it. So once again, right, the idea here is, yes, this thing can be a source of great blessing, but it's totally undomesticated. So you really need to be careful. And then we have this, I think, really important question asked. And the question is this: who is able to stand before the Lord? And of course, the answer to that question is no one. That's the proper answer. In 1 Corinthians 2:14, it's kind of interesting. Paul actually raises a similar question. He's describing apostolic ministry and what it involves, and he's also describing some of the suffering that's been afflicted on him. And toward the end of that, in 1 Corinthians 2:14, he raises the question, who is sufficient for these things? That is, who is qualified to be an apostle? And of course, obviously, right, this is like a rhetorical question, right? And the obvious answer to that question also is no one. Now, this is a really important question, because both in Samuel and also Paul, right, something really important is being raised. And that is that no one has the right to stand before God. No one has the innate ability to be an apostle, right? When the 11 are choosing a successor to Judas, right, they don't put an ad in the employment section of the Jerusalem Times saying, wanted apostle, must have good speaking ability, good organizational skills, apply to Apostle Peter, excellent fringe benefits, something like that. No, the idea here is that in both cases, standing before God and being an apostle, those are things that only God himself can actually render possible. And it's an important lesson to learn that. It's an important lesson for both Israel and the church to take that in, and also to take it very, very seriously. Now, one final remark here, and then we'll move on. I also just want to say a final kind of reflection about the Ark of the Covenant itself. Once again, just to kind of, because obviously it has played a really important role here. One of the ways I think that we can kind of think about the covenant is to think about the Ark of the Covenant as almost having a kind of sacramental significance, right? It's an objective thing, which is a sign of God's actual presence. And it can be a source of both blessing, but also, if treated irreverently, it can also affect the opposite. It's interesting that this same logic actually is applied by Paul in 1 Corinthians 11 to what he says to the church in Corinth about the Eucharist and about the Corinthians' basic malpractice of it. Almost like the Ark of the Covenant, right? This sacrament can be both a source of immense blessing, but if it's treated irreverently, it can also be a source of undoing. Here's what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 11:27. he's commenting on the way that the Corinthians have been celebrating the sacrament and pointing out their mistakes. Whoever therefore eats the bread or drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty concerning the body and blood of the Lord. Let a person examine himself, and so eat of the bread and drink of the cup. For anyone who eats and drinks without discerning the body eats and drinks judgment on himself. That is why many of you are weak and ill, and some have died. So there, right? That is, once again, it's this idea, right, that is this a source of blessing? Yes. Can it be treated in any old way? No. Same idea applies. Now, let's take a quick look at the beginning of 1 Samuel 7. Yeah, Ben? Yeah, that seems to be the idea, is that, we want to have this thing like move along. Yeah. Yeah.
With the Sinai incident, God tells Moses that he and Aaron and the priests can go up the mountain, but the people should stay far away from the mountain because they wish to see him instead of wishing to hear him. I think that's what goes along here, because seeing is sort of superficial, but hearing is, deep down in your heart. So that's, I think, what's going on. The difference between seeing and hearing.
Of course, the elders of Israel eventually do go up and they see the God of Israel.
It's sort of biblical because there's so many statements about if you see God, you'll die.
Mm-hmm.
And people are able to go before him. So does that mean they see him or not? I don't know.
It says they saw the God of Israel and ate and drank.
No, but they didn't die.
Right. Yeah.
That worked out.
So let's take a look at the beginning of 1 Samuel 7. Especially 7:3 here. I think how 7 begins is really important because notice here, basically Samuel has kind of like been absent, right? For 4 and 5. We see him at the beginning of 4, and then he kind of like vanishes, and now he's back and is sort of like the center of action here. So 7:3. And Samuel said to all the house of Israel, if you are returning to the Lord with all your heart, then put away the foreign gods and the Asherot from among you, and direct your heart to the Lord and serve him only, and he will deliver you out of the hand of the Philistines. So the people of Israel put away the Baals and the Asherot, and they served the Lord only. So this is more of the background to the capture of the ark, right? So we learn here, and I've already mentioned this, but now we see the first signs of it. The people of Israel, in addition to worshiping the God of Israel, right, are also worshiping these other Canaanite gods. And so they've got, these little like household gods, little images of the gods in their tents or wherever they happen to be dwelling. In this case, the god Baal, the storm god, and the female god Asherot, who was sort of like a fertility goddess. And so basically what Samuel does here, notice this, and this is the first significant thing now that he's doing, is he says, okay, folks, you have to make a choice. It's either you're worshiping the God who is represented by the Ark of the Covenant, or your personal collection of household gods and goddesses that are sitting up on your mantelpiece or wherever they are. They have to be removed. This, of course, is reminiscent of something that Joshua does, right? That is, Joshua tells people, okay, you have to decide who you're going to serve. Either the gods that are here among the Canaanites or the God of your fathers, so you have to make this choice. And now Samuel's doing the same thing. And so we're told here that they put these things away, and I think that's a deliberately ambiguous statement, right? It's not that, they collect them all up and, haul them out to the city dump and, Rather, you get the idea that they've been put away, but they might be coming out at some point again, right? And we just want to remember here, right, that the issue here isn't just you've got these little physical statues in your house, right? It's actually something deeper, right? It's that the people of Israel, by having these gods in their houses, right, are in effect hedging their bets. So we've got our storm god, we've got our fertility god, we've got, to kind of maybe, modern day gods, we've got God that'll keep your car from breaking down, and we've got an anti-hurricane God, and we've got a stock market God that'll make sure all your investments go up. And, the idea right here is that they're in effect saying, sure, we really trust the God of Israel, but just in case, we kind of got our backups. And so it's not just that they're making, a sort of theological mistake. It's a trust issue, right? The presence of all those things, those little images, right, are a sign of a failure of trust. And so that's why Samuel wants them to get rid of it. Then Samuel said, "Gather all Israel at Mizpah, and I will pray to the Lord for you." So they gathered at Mizpah and drew water and poured it out before the Lord and fasted on that day and said there, "We have sinned against the Lord." And Samuel judged the people of Israel at Mizpah. Now when the Philistines heard that the people of Israel had gathered at Mizpah, the lords of the Philistines went up against Israel. And when the people of Israel heard of it, they were afraid of the Philistines. And the people of Israel said to Samuel, "Do not cease to cry out to the Lord our God for us, that he may save us from the hand of the Philistines." So Samuel took a nursing lamb and offered it as a whole burnt offering to the Lord. And Samuel cried out to the Lord for Israel, and the Lord answered him. And as Samuel was offering up the burnt offering, the Philistines drew near to attack Israel. But the Lord thundered with a mighty sound that day against the Philistines and threw them into confusion, and they were defeated before Israel. Then the men of Israel went out from Mizpah and pursued the Philistines and struck them as far as Beth-kar. So notice what happens here. This is sort of like probably the best analogy for what Samuel does here. It's sort of like an Old Testament version of Ash Wednesday. This is a public, collective act of repentance. Okay? And so all the people gather together, and they confess their sin. We have sinned against the Lord. Appropriate sacrifices are offered as a sign of this, particularly the burnt offering. Remember, from our kind of journey through Leviticus, we learned that the importance of the burnt offering was that the whole animal is offered to be, combusted, and it's a sign of one's total dedication to God. That's the idea behind the burnt offering. So there's a sort of public confession of sin, act of repentance, act of turning back to God, and it's only when this occurs that the people of Israel are delivered from the hand of the Philistines. So a really important lesson there. And then one final thing, and this is where we'll have to stop. 7:12, another really important event occurs. Then Samuel took the stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shen, and called its name Ebenezer, for he said, "Till now the Lord has helped us." So the Philistines were subdued and did not again enter into the territory of Israel. So as a reminder, and we've seen this before, right? As a reminder of this event, Samuel has this stone set up. It's called Ebenezer, which means something like, stone of remembrance or something like that. But notice the importance of it, right? The stone that's set up here is to remind the people of Israel of what's happened. That is, it's sort of like a way, right, of recalling what God has done for them at this point, so they don't forget it. That is, I think there's a really important kind of spiritual principle that's at work here, and that is, on our own, right, we sinners will not remember God's mercies unprompted. So we need prompts. and the stone here is one of those prompts to remind the people of Israel of what happened. What we'll do next Sunday is we'll get into chapter 8, where this is a big turning point now. The people of Israel are going to demand a king, and we'll watch the drama of how all that unfolds.